Welcome, everybody. Ari Rosenbaum here with Ron Stair. Welcome to that 401k virtual bunch. Some housekeeping. Our next virtual bunch is in 2 weeks. Ron Sellers will be my guest. He is a broker in Florida. He's also the only guy that I know that has a Super Bowl ring because he played for the Dolphins in the 70s. So he'll be a fun guest in 2 weeks. Day after that, we got a virtual conference on September 25th. Another one on October 23rd, and then we got a national virtual event in January with my special guest, Walt Frazier. We'll try to get somebody in on day two. I got people in my, the meeting room is always a problem because you've got people in the lobby where you don't have in a webinar. So anyway, Ron, thank you for joining me. We've known each other quite some time already. Back when I was a lowly associate at some law firm on Long Island.
Lowly was the word. As I say about associates in law firms, nobody cares about them. It makes it very easy to design plans, though.
No, I was at a really nice size, they're still around, nice size Long Island firm, I think when I first was doing CLE. And I think it was Morit Hock, and I did a whole thing on qualified plans. And I'm saying that I said, you know, one of the beauties of new comparability and cash balance is with law firms, we can carve out the associates because they're highly compensated employees, and we could give them nothing. And that's the beauty of it. And one of the partners says, "Thanks a lot." You know, like I mentioned something that I shouldn't, but yeah, it's law firm. You know, law associates are the low people in the totem pole.
I had mentioned that in a conversation once at a law firm mixer with one of the larger firms on the island one night. And I said to their marketing person, nobody cares about the associates. And she says, "Oh, we love our associates." I walk by and says, "No, we don't."
Yeah, they're indentured servants. And my wife works for the longest time when I first met her and for so many years later, worked for government. And she never understood, like, you know, when I left Geller Group and went to I went to 2 law firms for about 3 years. And she didn't understand, like, the nonsense that I had to go through until she went and worked for law firms and then realized all the nonsense that I kind of was holding in about, you know, partners and marketing and all that kind of stuff. She finally realized that when she went on her own. So speaking of experience, how did you get into the retirement plan business? You know, my story is it's the first job I got. Harvey Berman was paying me $35,000 a year to be an ERISA attorney, and that's it. How'd you get into the retirement plan business?
Oh, well, I was working at an insurance agency in Connecticut that owned at the pre-ERISA, because I'm old. And I was doing non-qualified actuarial work for them. And ERISA came out, and the guy came by and threw it on my desk and said, "Read this." Expert. Right. And I said, "Okay." And I continued to work there for another 5.5 years, finished grad school, went off and taught in med school for a semester, realized I hated it, came back and called him up. I said, "Can I come back?" He said, "Yes, but only if you buy the place." So that was in 1979. So here I am.
What has been the difference going back to the 70s? 1979 predates 401k plans by a couple of years. What's the difference between then and now? I mean, I started in the late 90s. That's, you know, the computer age, 79.
Well, you know, when it first came out, there was no testing. There was no discrimination testing. So in 1979, when the K provision came out, you got to throw another $7,500 into the plan on top of any profit sharing allocation you were making. And that was the start of it. And it was really somewhat benign until 1986. You know, we started to have to do some testing and stuff in the early 80s, like 83, 84. But in 1986, what occurred was the shift from the insurance industry to the mutual fund industry with tax reform. And literally in a 90-day period, the insurance industry, which heavily subsidized us because we were helping their guys sell product, the mutual fund industry came out, and they were now the big walking studs in the room.
Right.
And at the same time, because of the law changes that occurred in 86, when they cut the limits way back, all my little kids in the office who could do 401k testing were now the big studly people walking around the office because nobody cared about the actuaries. We were concerned about, overfunded retirement plans and how do we get out of this mess.
And that's when the DB plans pretty much had to be mothballed for about 3 years, wasn't,
Oh yeah, it was frightening because don't forget, cutting back the 415 limits everywhere. So at the time, the salaries we could use for the plan was 235,000. They rolled that back to 90.
Right.
The benefits were almost at the same level they're at today. So it's taken them 25 years to get back to those same levels of benefits. And plans were sitting with enough money to fund to those old benefits with a new benefit structure. And you created this incredible cottage industry of overfunded plans. But the only place left to put money was in the 401k.
When I worked for Harvey Berman, the paralegal, Harvey was a great guy, but, wasn't practicing. Marge Tracy was the paralegal, and she was, again, like you, worked pre-ERISA. And the one thing that she always told me that I always remember talking about change in the business, she said, you know what, there are a lot of providers with TRA 86, and they just went out of business. They could not handle the change, and they just simply went out. So,
I still have my original copy of ERISA, which was like 273 pages. And then I remember when A4 came out and it was almost 750 pages. Right? Regulation that's 2.5 times the size of ERISA in the first place.
Right.
And that's the world that we live in now.
What do you see the challenges of running a TPA these days? I mean, just this week, Mass Mutual is being bought by Empower. We've seen a lot of consolidation ever since, in my opinion, fee disclosure.
Do we want to talk about Mass Mutual and Empower or just consolidation in general?
No, I don't want to talk about consolidation in general, because that has been the motif of the last, to me, 8 years.
Well, do you want to go and buy I want to hang a picture in my living room. I need a particular hook. Do I want to go to my local hardware store and ask the guy, what do I need? And he's now going to say, tell me about your wall. Is it plywood? Is it wallboard? Is it cement? He's asking questions. Or I can go to Home Depot and maybe get somebody there that wants to talk to me and buy 27 of these things in a plastic package. Or I can go on Amazon and try to figure it out completely by myself. And that's what the consolidation's doing.
Do you see any threats to your business because of consolidation?
That's not our marketplace. It really isn't. The race to the bottom is still the race to the bottom. You can't make stuff cost less than zero. And the bigger the place is, the less the service model, the smaller and more constricted the service model is going to be. And eventually people realize that their retirements are really important. So I need to talk to, so when you look at this stuff, computers are cheap. Computers that have software on them are a little more expensive. Computers that have artificial intelligence running the software, more expensive again. Artificial intelligence that almost works is more expensive.
Right.
So from there to the untrained human, which is more expensive. And then you get trained humans, which are really expensive. But then you're going to take trained unions that aren't talking to 300 clients that have time to actually pay attention to you. And that's where we are. So for the 3 to 5% of the marketplace that really cares about getting out of Dodge, we're not going to compete with the MEPs, the PEPs, the consolidated groups.
What do you think about PEPs?
I think they have a place. They're going to take half the marketplace that has no access to anything that's reasonably priced and give them access to it. You're going to fit into a box, but it's going to be a box that you didn't have because your choice before was to go out and buy a Simple or a SEP that you're going to screw up.
Right.
And you're still not going to have the efficiencies on the fees. So there's a whole section of the marketplace where one, it creates awareness. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to take advantage of them because the realities are, if you don't have a plan, I guess over the next 5 years, I'm going to say, the states are going to require you have one of theirs. And New York and California does such a stunning job of running their own retirement plans. I wanted to run mine, especially with no fiduciary hook in it. So they're going to have some traction as a result of that. But the downside is, if your business has any complexity to it, you're stuck in their model of 3 choices, and it's like Hotel California. You can't get out. And my biggest concern is the payroll companies are going to come out of PEOs and move into that MEP and PEP space because they're going to hide fees in far more imaginative ways than they could do it before.
Right, and they'll screw it up.
Oh, that's a given. I mean, if some of these payroll companies get their 401k corrected, it was a complete and total accident.
I gotta give a shout out because I see Andy Zimney on the call. Andy Zimney works for you, and I work with Andy Zimney at Geller, and Andy Zimney to me was the greatest actuary I ever worked with. He was one of the few actuaries we could actually take to a meeting because he spoke English. We had another guy, I don't want to name his name, who was the actuary, kind of the head actuary before Andy, and you couldn't take him to a meeting. He would always stammer. He didn't know his stuff. And he would it was just like a stuttering thing. And I remember Sheldon would say, just spit it out. Just, you know, I just want to give a shout out to Andy Zimney because I think Andy Zimney is the greatest. For the people who don't know, your shop has a very good reputation in terms of plan design and getting things right, doing it correctly, which is always, I just did a podcast recording it and it'll be out tomorrow. And I always say the difference between a good TPA and a bad one is the good TPA can make certain mistakes. When they do it very rarely. They fess up and they say, you know, we screwed up, we're going to fix it. Other TPAs, the bad ones, like, you know, ADP and paychecks, they will say, you know what, yeah, Andy Zimmy says my check is in the mail, so he's writing me a check. So no check needed, Andy. So they basically ADP and paychecks, they screw up. It's always plan sponsor's fault. You didn't fill this out correctly. What are like some of the greatest horror story of a client that came to you that you had to fix the problem?
Oh, there's so many.
Like, we'll take one as an example. To me, I had the DB plan that put all their money in with Bernie Madoff, so it's kind of clear, like, that's the worst.
No, actually, that could have been okay because that was just money. Well, we have one that we've just taken over now. So our biggest problem, quite frankly, is there's no bar for admission in our business. So, you know, Willie, our doorman in our office, can legally hang out a shingle and say he's a TPA.
Right.
And that's what we compete with. So we have one of those TPAs. It's up in Connecticut. Works out of his garage. Actually has an office, but it doesn't matter. It's an army of one. This particular client, going back to 2004, it had 5 safe harbor 401k plans, 3 different defined benefit plans, no documents. The plan has been frozen and thawed 8 times.
Right.
We've got excise taxes right now of about $1.6 million. We're taking it into self-correction. It's horrific. And the guy says, I hired a TPA, I hired an actuary, my accountant pay attention to it. And that's a story. Then we have one with one of the big box providers where the client is supposed to go online and check the a la carte menu of the things that he wants. Well, in 8 years, they've never done an ADP test.
Of course. Right.
Well, the plan has failed 5 of those 8 years. So now the corrections for that, as you know, are costly because I've got 127 employees. So we go back and basically make up half of the contributions they were never given the opportunity to make because they were never informed there was even a plan. The same guy was told by that vendor when he didn't want to cover certain groups of employees, they said, just tell us that he's in the union and we'll just exclude them. Well, he doesn't have any union employees. But one of the non-union employees has gone to the Labor Department and wants to know where his benefits are.
Of course.
So that's going to be messy.
Sure.
And our personal favorite was in an 18-month period, we had 5 people that died. They came to us from the estate attorneys because the vendors or the wirehouses were not releasing money to the beneficiaries because nobody had a document.
Right.
So where are the trust and estate attorneys when they're doing somebody's wills? Why are they not saying to the client, oh, you got this $3 million, $4 million asset. Where's the documentation for it?
They never ask. They don't.
They never ask that question.
Yep.
And now we've taken all of these into self-correction and just to get the money out of the plan. And it's a horrible expense for the estate. You know, somebody's just buried a loved one and they've got to go through this silliness with the IRS in order to disgorge the money.
They don't.
You know, it's messy.
Well, I always jokingly say that my worst clients are lawyers because they don't know ERISA. You know, ERISA attorneys are okay. Well, most of them are good in my book, but a trust and estate attorney just doesn't, you know, tends not to understand ERISA, that this is a lurking problem, especially in these small businesses where you could have a DB plan, you could have a solo 401k or just a 401k of 1 or 2 people. And I've had issues over the years dealing with termination. Who can sign the paperwork when the owner of the company is dead?
One of our clients, we found out through the financial advisor that, and he's just a 401k client to us. We found out through the financial advisor he's had a DB plan for 2 years someplace else. A solo practitioner.
Right.
And I went back to the accountant and I said, well, we asked this question, do you have any other plans? He said, well, we thought that you meant 401k plans.
I remember at Geller, we had a former politician, very well-known politician in New York City, and we developed a 401k plan for his consulting company. And apparently we did a very good job. And they said to us, can you handle our DB plan? And we said, what DB plan? Yeah. I love clients who just all of a sudden, you know, and it's one of the questionnaires when you're taking over a client. Do you have any other qualified plans? Yes, no, not maybe, you know.
Yeah, if it's a maybe, you've got some fiduciary issues probably.
No, it is true. I always say that you're like the funniest willing owner of a TPA. I mean, I've worked for people in TPA business who are funny, but they weren't really, I thought they were funny, but they weren't really supposed to be funny. They were just incompetent. Hello, Manny. Your sense of humor is sarcasm, which I love. Does it ever hurt your business? Because the reason I ask that is sometimes not sometimes, I look at myself and I think we've had this discussion where of some of the stuff that I've written in the past, and maybe you're looking back, I shouldn't have written that, but I am who I am, and maybe that's rubbed people the wrong way. I always jokingly say that that's the reason I'm not invited to speak at conferences anymore. Do you see, you know, your humor as a great plus, or do you see sometimes where maybe you rub the client the wrong way because you're
occasionally occasionally it's a pebble in somebody's shoe. You know, my favorite quote to a client this year was, he said, are you going to make fun of me or help me? And I said, can't I do both? And he smiled, but, you know, occasionally that, you know, we're dealing with serious stuff, but you don't have to be serious jerk in the process.
No, it's just funny because, you know, I always talk about my career. I remember I was in law school and it was moot court, and I was a first year law student. And I had like a Flintstones tie, you know, with the, you know, thread and all that crap. And I just will never forget the second year law student running the moot court said, well, you know, you shouldn't have worn that tie. And it's like, who cares? All, you know, as long as you produce a quality service. I mean, I appreciate your sense of humor because it's,
you know, one of my very long-term clients is a very straight-laced guy, just really wound very tight. And when they came to me, they had a major problem. And the accountant walks them into my office, and it was a Thursday afternoon in the summer, and I'm in cutoffs and an Hawaiian shirt. And at the time I had a perm, so I had this big curly mass of hair because that's what we did in the 80s.
Sure.
And one of the clients looked at me and looked at his partner and said, he's wearing an Hawaiian shirt. And I looked up and said, you know, the guy with the tie is the one that completely screwed you up and got you here. You could go back there. And they looked at each other and said, okay, you'll do. So, you know, it's a function of the individual. But you're right. Sometimes people aren't going to appreciate it. And that's all right. You know, my job's to help you, and I'm going to get you there. And I'm going to be very, very straight with you as to what your options are, how things work. And if it's broken, I'm going to tell you it's broken.
We've had a lot of consolidation on Long Island, which you're based. You're based in East Meadow, which is home of one of the Stu Leonards out there. How have you had a tough time in finding good quality people to work for you? Because you know that's been my experience. You know, working 9 years for TPAs. I always looked at where I worked. People were very inexperienced. They got them all, you know, I jokingly say they got them off the boat from Stony Brook, provided them no training. And when you have no training as an administrator, you never become good. You just, 20 years in, you're still crap. You just, because you never got that training in the beginning. How do you deal with recruiting employees, providing them training? To me, that is such a part of the business that people don't really talk about.
Well, we spend an enormous amount of money on this. We just do. Fortunately, most of my quasi-competitors are assholes to work for. They just are. So the first thing starts with treating people like human beings. So one of my more recent hires, he's 20 years in the business. He worked for a horrible human being. He was handling 180 clients. He was working six and a half days a week. And I said, tell you what, I'll give you $5,000 a year more. I'm going to cut your caseload to 80, and you get 6 weeks vacation, because that's what we give people. And I want you to shut down on the weekend. And I want you to, you know, not respond to my emails if I send you something on a Saturday afternoon. And I'm going to give you quality of life. And by the way, you're 20 years in the business and you don't have any credentials, and you've got 2 years to get a credential. And I'm going to pay for it. But you got to go do it. And we've taken over 3 of those people in the last 2 years, and they've all gone and got their credentials. There's a lot of stuff to know. And nobody's going to, you know, I'm really good at this stuff. But, you know, one of my taglines is, I'm really good, but we collectively are outstanding.
That's a great explanation. Plain design. Would you say that over the last 10 years, more and more advisors understand what that is and how it could benefit their clients? Or do you still see the people going and just pushing it off to ADP and Paychecks and doing the...
Well, the average advisor knows nothing about what we do. I mean, there's only 42 advisors on Long Island to have more than 5 plans, which is sort of sad when you think about the number of plans that are around out there.
Right.
So the shiny object is always price, because they don't know how to port value. So in the last 2 weeks, I've gotten 3 offers for somebody that's going to come in and save me $200 to run my retirement plan. I mean, am I going to upset this for $200? There are clients that will. So one of the big box insurance companies sent me an email this morning, wanted to know if I would be willing to quote their new product for purposes of their rollout 401k. So I filled in the issue because we have a 3-person startup. I had 2 choices. It was 3% or a 5% automatic enrollment. It was going to be a traditional safe harbor match or a 4% dollar per dollar on the first 4% safe harbor match. I had a choice of 6 mutual funds that are going to range in price from 50 to 80 basis points without any compensation for the FA. And it's going to cost $168 a month to run it. Where am I saving anything?
Right.
I got no selectivity, but the FA says, look, they're only going to charge $500 up front. Yeah, but you got nothing, and you're spending $700 more to administer it the first year, and you got really crappy funds, and you're not getting paid. You haven't get paid yet. So that's the world that we're competing with. So until somebody can actually express value and what the FA brings to the equation versus what does a competent TPA bring to the equation, it's going to be more of the same.
But, you know, you talked about Long Island. I mean, I would assume now your outreach is just all over the United States.
We have clients in 29 states and 9 countries.
Do people still have, I mean, back in the day when I started 20 some odd years ago, people wanted somebody local. Does this matter anymore? Or do people
It doesn't matter as much as it used to. You know, that whole thing of being a global economy is true. And people figure if I can do business in France, why can't I do business in New Jersey? Yeah, New Jersey would draw the line. But
sure.
No, but seriously, you know, and electronics have made it far easier. You know, they have. I mean, I used to have to get on a plane to go to South Dakota. I have been to South Dakota.
Still haven't been there. Maybe one day I'll have a conference over there.
That's not. It's overrated.
We don't have a state. They don't have Major League Baseball. How has COVID impacted your business, and what do you see the changes that are? I still think there are going to be changes that we're going to see after after life comes back to normal.
You know, it's affected me individually more than my staff, I think, because my management style is what I refer to as management by walking around. I go into the office in the morning and I walk around the perimeter of the office. I talk to everybody, find out how they're doing, find out what they're working on, and questions start to pop up throughout the day. I got to a point where there's a question itself that I don't have a direct, immediate answer for. I could stand by my conference room and just say, who's available? And now I have 3 to 5 other trained people standing there, and we go into the conference room and we beat up the problem, and 15 minutes later, we're done. We don't get to do that now when we're not all in the office. So that's the first part. Because I'm licensed in the UK, our cybersecurity is more stringent. Got in the way of some of our stuff in the first 2 weeks of COVID land, where everybody was stressing the systems and working from home. So we had to put in a second server. We've had to put in a second firewall. Some of the people at home, their firewalls were bad. So, you know, we had a lot of technology tweaks that had to get made. But I think the biggest disadvantage is we just don't have that socialization that comes with a cohesive group of people. Our average employee is with us almost 20 years.
Right.
So they build relationships with one another, and you know, and we miss that.
What about changes going forward? I talked to a TPA today on another call, and you know, we were talking about they're based one of the largest cities here on the East Coast, and the guy said, you know, we're probably going to cut back on our space. We don't need to be, you know, in Center City. We could be in.
Well, and that's it, because you know I'm looking at the stuff coming in the door because we're surprisingly busy. Because somehow we've gotten this reputation of no matter how bad it is, we can fix it.
You're like, I used the quote today, Emma Lazarus, you know, on the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. You're tired, you're poor, so it's give us your crap, you know, your disqualifying type plans and BCP plans and EPCRS and all that stuff.
Well, you know, and it's, you know, showing my age, we go back to, you know, give it to Mikey because Mikey will eat anything. You know,
I still use that line.
Andy has made me not say yes as often as I used to, though. But
I don't know if I don't know if he did that with Sheldon, but you know, we would take some stuff. I'm like, what? There was one time with Sheldon. This is before Andy was there. There was a kosher wholesaler of food from the Bronx Terminal Market. They had a 401k plan and a DB plan, and the DB plan had an NRA of age 35, and that's before the age 62 regs came out.
You know, you eat that food, you kind of probably have a heart attack and die.
I said to him, I said, you know, unless it's Major League Baseball, there is no reasonable job where the NRA is 35.
Well, we have a number of celebrity clients that would disagree with you.
Well, it depends. Listen, it depends. What type of celebrity. I mean, if they're on Survivor, shelf life or a music star, the shelf life's a little bit shorter than somebody in the kosher food wholesaling business.
Once you get out of a boy band, where do you go?
Exactly. Well, we didn't take we took the 401k. We didn't take the DB plan because I said I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I forget who the actuary was, but yeah.
Well, there's such a choice of people that would do this.
Hey, Morris would have done that.
Yes.
May
But
rest
my favorite trivia answer, name the only person disenrolled and disbarred in the same week.
I had something I ran by Andy with, and the son is doing the work. So I got to talk to probably Andy again. It's a DB plan that is $11 million overfunded.
Yeah, but insofar as your space issue, I don't think we're going to cut our space back, but our new hires, we're not going to worry about having space for them.
But
because people still want to come into the office,
right,
and they still want to have their space. So we're limiting it to 8 people a day in the office out of 27 that are there. So all the administrators have their own office. And we have 5 clerical support people floating around. So 1 clerical support person a day, 7 or 8 administrators, and they're in their own space, and that's how it's going to work.
Yeah, Mike Webb asked a question. He asked Andy, are you the guy that Ari wants to nominate for the Actuary Hall of Fame? The answer is absolutely yes.
Sorry, what was that question?
Mike Webb, who always attends my events, he asked Andy if Andy is going to be in the I think because I mentioned Andy before, and he is my choice for the Actuary Hall of Fame if that is a thing. He's certainly first ballot.
Could be.
He's like Willie Mays as far as I'm concerned.
Well, there's Rochelle. Pom-poms, Rochelle.
Andy's head is gonna be a little too big if I continue to throw it on him. But like I said, that's true. We actually, because we had a salesperson. I always mention, may rest in peace, Rich Larita, and Andy was the first actuary that we actually could take to client meetings, because the other one we just couldn't take to a client meeting. He didn't know his stuff anyway, and he couldn't speak. And you need somebody to speak.
The civilians, which is anybody outside of our business, has no idea what the present value of a future accrued benefit is. I don't understand why they don't understand that. But when you start talking about funding issues, they're clueless. They don't know. So how do you break this down into crayon for people?
How do you see the future, again, with COVID, in terms of attending conferences, sales meetings? I still think that overall you're still going to have a lot of people who are just going to say, you know what, why do I have to visit you in California when I could do this over Zoom?
Well, the biggest reason is money is an emotional topic. And me giving my money to employees is an emotional topic. Giving money to the government is an emotional topic. People want to deal with people. And that's really all it is. So I was on a Zoom call this morning. I got a father, I got 2 kids, I got the financial advisor. It's echoing. The kids and the father are interrupting each other. You don't have that same dysfunction when you're sitting together as people. And people want to be able to.
You're freezing up on me. I'm here, Ron.
Focus. Sometimes you want to take out a pad and draw a sketch.
Yeah.
Because I could draw. I could tell you. So that's. I think that we're still going to have human contact. And some clients don't care. Similarly, I've got clients that don't even want to talk to us on the phone. They want to deal by email.
Right.
So you have to figure out what the client's communication style is, what they want. But most importantly is, how are you going to communicate to get your message across to them? Because the average client really doesn't even understand the questions to ask. And our job is to guide them through that and direct it. I say to people all the time, I don't care what you do. It's not my plan. It's not my money. They're not my employees. Tell me what you're trying to achieve, and I'll tell you how close we can get to that in the confines of the law.
Right. What about conferences? I still think that a lot of these national events, you're just not going to have that travel.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that's going to happen as much, and that's unfortunate because it's not, you and I both know this, it's not so much the education that goes on in the class environment, it's the time that you spend with the other professionals and have conversations just like this, what's going on in your life kind of thing. Because what I do find is plan design is somewhat regional. Somebody will have an idea in an area, start to do it, and it sort of stays there in that region until it gets populated into the conferences. So I know, for example, Ed Repper, you know, I talking to him a couple of years ago, and he says, and I took over one of his cases, he said, how did you improve on my plan design? And I told him, I don't care. Listen, there's enough business for all of us, and we get along well.
Right.
And he says, that's very cool. I never would have thought about that. So, you know, those things occur. And I have those conversations with most of the quality TPAs around the country, but sitting down and having a drink and sharing a meal is really a very big part of that. And I'm going to miss that if we don't get back to it in some form.
No, it's true. I mean, it's such a weird time. And I mean, the technology, I could only imagine, you know, I started this business when we still didn't have web access for 401k plans. You know, if you wanted to make a change, you had to make a phone call. You did it by piece of paper. You didn't know what your account balances was until you got your statements. It's amazing with the technology now. Imagine what we would have had 20 years ago, how kind of screwed we would have been if this pandemic happened 20 years ago.
Look at just the robust nature of the record keeping environment. I mean, that technology is fascinating when you think about it. But why is one record keeper more expensive than another? Well, it's a function of how many bells and whistles you want to hang on to it. But once you get past it, it's all basically the same stuff. Bottom line is all the vendors are selling the same stuff. And they all have to make a profit, and they all have boards of directors to answer to, and they all have employees to pay. So how few employees are they going to pay, or how greedy are they going to get? And the consolidation has got people really afraid. So one of our local, semi-local firms is now selling HSAs and selling health insurance and doing HRA administration. It's like, why don't you just do one thing really well?
It's true.
But they're going to lose revenue share. That particular firm is going to lose revenue share to the MEPs and the PEPs in a big way. And that's going to be the problem. But you can't charge record keeping fees tied to assets.
I agree. I think you and I are probably talking about the same firm. The one that was, I believe, bought out by, there was one in Uniondale that got bought out, and you may be referencing.
That's just another one.
That was another one. But anyway,
Yes.
I agree with you that you lose your focus and you're trying to sell things that have really something to do with 401k plans, but I think in that situation, you may be stepping on people's toes. You know, I always have a thing in business, don't compete against your friends. And you're, you know, trying to grow. I understand what they're trying to do, but I've never seen any firm do it well. You know, when I was at Geller, his partner, who was, you know, the Mad Hatter, he wanted to sell legal insurance, you know, the prepaid legal. And it's just, to me, as an attorney, it's the worst thing that is available out there. Why do you have to, it's not something where, you know, you're not insuring anything. You're just paying for a benefit. So maybe when you need an attorney, you can get one. So it's interesting that they're trying to branch out. And I mean, do you see that in the future for a lot of TPAs where they're just going to go into payroll or different businesses? And
yeah, you know, that's another thing. I mean, every idiot with a computer thinks they can do payroll now. Payroll's complicated. It's simple. It's complicated simple because you have to pay attention to what are the different withholding rules in all the different places that you may have an employee getting paid. So take the employer just here on Long Island, where I've got an employee that may be coming in from New Jersey, from Connecticut, New York City. Payroll now gets complicated.
Yeah, I mean, even here, you know, if I'm working in the city and I'm a Long Island resident, I don't pay a city resident tax. But one day, 20 some odd years ago, you did, because there was a commuter tax.
So, you know, and if you look at the states, they are all hungry. They're all poorly run and under, you know, California's pension liability is just south of $1.5 trillion. It's like a real number even to a big state. So if you look at their income tax proposals, they're adding 3% to the millionaire's tax. They want to add a VAT on collective net worth over $30 million, which is a lot of that state. And they're saying that if you leave the state, they have anchors into that for 10 years. Now, the courts are going to have a good time with that, but they're spending way more money than they're taking in, and they're losing revenue. So what are they going to do? One of my insurance policies just renewed. My cyber liability insurance renewed today. New York State tacked on $550 for a processing fee. Really? What did you do for it? Besides nothing.
Right.
But they have to find ways to get revenue, because everybody you're at the top end of the food chain. I don't need to be paying 50, 60, 70% of my revenue out someplace.
When do you see they're going to start tapping into 401k plans for revenue?
Well, depends on who gets elected. You know, Biden wants to have that financial transaction tax. So the same group of people that want to sit there, and this is not political, this is just money.
Right.
The same group of people that are sitting there getting upset about the last 10 basis points in a 401k fee and complete disclosure wants to tax every transaction that occurs in the plan. Well, the participants are going to pay that.
You think it's going to kill the plans, or I mean?
Yeah. Now, listen, you know, some of these people on the island who will remain nameless, who are charging 3% on plan assets, that didn't kill the plan. So why is the transaction tax going to kill it?
Well, listen, I'm still waiting for fee disclosures to kill the 401k plans. That was supposed to kill.
Yeah. So, you know, what is that with fee disclosures? Why is this so damn difficult? How much the TPA makes, how much the record keeper makes, how much the financial planner makes, how much the funds charge. We're done. Why do I need, in one of the payroll companies, it's an 82-page fee disclosure, an 8-point type that refers you to 6 websites? Why and how?
You're not the first person who brought that up. Someone else mentioned it to me.
Don't get me started on the fiduciary issues, because even though I'm not a fiduciary according to the Labor Department, I believe I should be. If I get paid any kind of revenue from the plan, whether it's just an employee paying for a distribution form, I'm a fiduciary. And I don't know why this is complicated. You get paid to give advice to a plan, you're a fiduciary. And if you don't want to be a fiduciary, get the hell out of the business and let somebody that knows what they're doing be in there.
Yeah, that was always an interesting fight that people would certainly fight about that. To me, it's what's the big deal? But, you know, when you're making money over what particular assets are in the plan, and you don't want to put the client's needs in front of your own, well, then I guess that's why you don't want to be a fiduciary.
Well, you know, there's a certain minimum cost to run a plan, though, too. I have no problem with financial advisors that go in there and charge a point to even a point and a half in some cases in a plan, because their time's got a value. I had a plumber here the other day. The guy was here for 45 minutes. He got $500. He fixed my problem. Could I have done it? Maybe, but I'd spend 3 days doing it, and it probably wouldn't have been done as well. So why do I want to treat the financial advisor any differently? Especially when it's a startup plan. I got $100,000 in the plan. How much money is that person going to make for the 3, 4, 5 meetings and the liability that goes with it? They got to get paid. So this whole race to the bottom thing is so much crap for people, because people need help doing this stuff. It's important. It's complicated. A lot of moving pieces.
But that race to the bottom never really materialized.
Yeah, but it looks like it on paper. You know, so when you have an insurance company that comes out who will remain nameless because their attorneys told me they will remain nameless.
Oh, you get those letters too.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not allowed to talk about the payroll companies anymore, so I refer to them as the one that's named after the average deferral percentage test, and the other one it sounds like a breakfast cereal.
I write an article about the payroll companies and why you shouldn't hire them as TPA. And there was one year, some general counsel, it was an attorney, I think it was a Paycheck, sent me a letter. And in those days, I never mentioned them by name and just sent me like a cease and desist. And I laughed at it. It's like, I can have my opinion.
But, you know, we got off topic. Where were we on that?
Where were we on that?
Race to the bottom, we were talking about.
Race to the bottom. Thank you. Greg was listening.
You know,
Welcome.
there was just a minimum cost to do anything. The guy that comes and mows my lawn has got to pay somebody, even if he's paying it illegally. He's got to pay somebody. He's got to have equipment. He's got to have insurance. He's got to have trucks to get everybody here. You got to pay somebody to do the stuff. So I just don't know what the problem is with people disclosing fees.
So in conclusion, because we're almost near the hour, how do people get in touch with you, follow you,
Well, Rochelle's going to do her job and follow up with everybody
who signs up? Okay.
Yeah, so, my name is Ronald Stair. Our phone number is 516-742-6123. My cell is 516-551-5294. And my email is rstair, like you walk up, STAIR, at cpdltd.com. And we actually do return phone calls.
Yes, that's important in this business. I remember at one of the TPAs I worked at, it was a administrator would not return phone calls, and the clients knew that he was there, but he would never return calls until the next day.
I don't understand it, but that's okay. But it's good for our business.
Exactly. So, Ron, thank you for being a part of this. Like I thought, it was going to be a lot of fun, and it was.
Thanks, folks. Good to see you.
Thanks so much.
Next time, Rochelle.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks.
Take care.